Whisky making requires a great deal of water, so much so that in the past a certain mystique was built up around each water source, and each distillery guarded its water source, and it was believed that it was the water, the individual water for each distillery, which made a difference. So when you've got distilleries very close to one another, all making different whisky, the difference was attributed to water. Now, today this is doubted by chemists, although many would still say that the water has a certain influence. I'm sitting here at Bowmore Distillery, right beside the source of the production water. There are two kinds of water used in making whisky. One is called production water. That's the water that is used actually to make the beer from which the spirit is distilled. And the second is cooling water. This is production water. It's a very brown colour. It's infused with peat, little particles of peat gathered from the land. Would this make a difference to the flavour of the whisky? Well, I have an open mind on it, of course, and we'll ask some distillery managers in the course of today whether they think it makes much of a difference.
I think it must do. I think it can't not have. If you think about the kind of areas of ground that the Lagavulin, for example, which is Bowmore's source, comes through peaty ground, it comes through sandy ground, and that peat alone will be made up of different plants and things like that than it will be in different parts of the island. So I think that almost certainly the water has to have a kind of unique quality that will impart something to the whisky. So I think that although the chemists will probably disagree and sort of say, well, there's no proof of that, I can't see how it can't not have an effect on the whisky. And they're obviously drawn from hugely different parts of the island. The minerals are completely different. Geologically, they'll be drawn from different types of rock and all that kind of thing. All these things will have an influence. And then, like I say, the Lagavulin, it goes through peaty ground, it goes through incredibly fertile ground, it goes through sandy ground, and all these things, I'm sure, will be influencing somehow the end result.
And having your own maltings, you also use that production water for steeping, don't you?
That's right, yes. So the barley is steeped in that, and then it's malted, and that too, yes, is bound to have an effect on it. So you've got the kind of the pincer movement, if you like. You've got the water being used when we're steeping the barley, and then obviously we're using it out peat when we're smoking it. So no, I think it can't not have an effect.
Well, my first thought is if you think about Scottish water in general is very soft, very, very good water. So that's number one. And also here at Royal Lochnagar we use spring water, which comes from the foothills of Lochnagar. So that is very, very cold, and it's coming up from quite a depth underground. So to the best of my knowledge, there is no real implication from the water as long as it's that good soft Scottish water. But to say that water gives individual flavours is something that I think we could maybe sit down over a few Lochnagars, have a good discussion on. So if they feel that their water is introducing something special into their whisky, well, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I mean, I was over in Lagavulin for many years, as you know, and the water there was quite individual in its own sense, if you like. So to argue that it bears no impact on the flavour would be absolutely wrong, but to the best of my knowledge, as far as I know, it doesn't seem to. But for many, many years, the argument was that it did. It was the main thing that changed the character of the whisky. We have cooling water here as well. Cooling water is obviously very important because we can't make spirit without that. And it's used here, we use it in a recirculation from the dam. So we take that into the worms and it goes through the worm tub, and from there it's pumped back in, so it's recirculated all the time. So, but that's very important to us as well, because we have worm tubs here, which is slightly different. There's only roughly about 12 distilleries that are left with worm tubs. And they produce individual flavours depending on how you run them. You have to run them in certain ways. Here at Royal Lochnagar, we try and run the worm tubs as hot as we possibly can, so that the spirit condenses out very, very low in the copper at the base. So it's very, very warm at the top. So as it goes down, it takes a long while. So there's long contact with copper. The longer the contact with the copper, then the lighter the spirit.
Yes, but a worm tub would generally want to, especially if you're running it cold with very cold water in the tub, would want to make a heavier spirit.
Absolutely, yes. But here at Lochnagar, we run them hot so that we can make a light spirit.
Cask,
Reducing water, it comes from the springs again, so it's the same process water. And we put that into the casks or into the new make spirit that comes off the still, and we reduce it down from approximately 68 degrees, 68% down to 63.5. And then we fill it into our casks here. And that water is very, very important because it's going to be in that cask for a long time to help that spirit mature.
And why do you suppose, why 63.5?
Well, for many years it was done at a higher strength, but we now feel that it matures better at that strength, plus there's not so much of the angel share. If you put in at a higher strength, I think the losses are higher.
Very much so. I think that the water on Islay is very soft. It obviously has that peaty flavour, well, not the colour more, and it's incredibly soft and pure. And yes, I think it has a huge influence, and certainly if you were distilling using Glasgow tap water, it would be very different.
Well, this business of water and the influence that it might have upon flavour is clearly open to debate. And I'm now at Lagavulin Distillery and will ask the opinion of Graham Logie, the manager here, to see what he has to say about it.
Just about every person that comes to Lagavulin will mention peaty water almost straight away.
As a possible influence?
Especially when the start of the distillery tour goes right past the burn with the water running over the lade, and you can see the nice peaty colour. So I try to convince them that we have peaty water at home, and the first thing we do is boil it to get rid of the peatiness and the discoloration. So by the time we get to the still house, we've told everybody how much we boil things, heat things. So there's just no way that peaty water is going to give you peaty whisky just by using natural ingredients.
Because it doesn't give you peaty tea in the house.
No, no, and that's exactly why we're boiling it in the first place. So it can't do any harm, and it probably helps, but we still need the peating effect of the maltings to give us a nice peaty flavour. And
do you think in the steeps, in the maltings, the fact that you're steeping in peaty water would make any difference to adding any phenols to the green malt before it's
well,
dry?
again, we're not reaching any of the temperatures that we reach in distilleries, so we'll maybe not get rid of as much, but it certainly won't do any harm, but it won't have the effect of burning peat. Remember, if you smell a piece of peat, it'll smell like absolutely nothing until you make it burn. So when peat's enclosed within water, it's probably doing exactly the opposite. It's holding the peaty aromas and flavours in rather than letting them out.
What about the temperature of the water? Does that apply in your condensers, or really only in a worm tub?
Well, again, temperature, the water we have in our condenser is not in contact with the product. So, I mean, if you're talking about ambient temperature in the water, that is used for the process.
But then, am I not right in thinking that if you've got very cold water in your condensers in the dead of winter, I mean, it wouldn't affect here on Islay, I imagine, but say you're up on Speyside, that you get a different style of spirit than if in the summertime it was sort of much warmer in the condensers. Yeah,
but we also then would we can control our temperatures and we can control our speed of production.
Yes.
It's probable that, everything's better in the winter time because it's cooler, it's easier to gauge. Summertime, the ambient temperature rises, which gives us problems, but it's not a case of making two different whiskies, summer and winter, by any means. We're only talking about an ambient temperature, and in this country, we don't have the extremes of temperature that we have around the world, so it's not that big a problem. Because
it was always said that the boys working in a distillery could tell the make made in the winter than the summer, presumably new make, not mature whiskey, but
And also, in summertime, you don't have high winds, you don't have drafts, so everything's held in. The spirit's safe, the still house. A bit like the warehouse as well. The less times you open the door, the more your aromas and your alcohol vapours just hang in there. So making them more noticeable. You also remember that if you are using water domestically or in the process, it's filtered, to take out the the large
Solid-
pieces.
solid matters.
So straight away, half the peat is removed, from water just by filtration.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would just choke up every pump and heat exchanger we had
Yeah.
in the place.
What about, you mentioned the warehouses. Do you think that the atmosphere within a warehouse contributes anything to the flavour? I mean, you hear these stories about, the likes of some of the warehouses here on Islay, which are right down by the sea, and in the winter gales, they might be the salt-laden air and all this sort of stuff. Do you think that might have any effect?
It can't do any wrong, and it must have some effect. But we don't store all our whisky for maturation on the one site.
No.
Right? It is stored elsewhere in Scotland. So whether the final product is a mixture of two different maturation styles, or whether everything matures in the same way. Again, warehouses tend to, they don't have big windows. They usually face away from the south-facing sun. We try and keep them as protected from the atmosphere as possible. So, I mean, ambient temperature inside a warehouse will fluctuate probably maybe 5 to 8 degrees summer to winter. So, but we can't say hand on heart that all whisky matured by the sea, is positively different or positively better, because we do source so much elsewhere in Scotland.
Yeah.
But the principle is that Islay is a rock with a sponge on top. Maybe 1 metre, 2 metres, 3 metres, 4 metres thick of peat. So any water that falls by rain falls through the peat, percolates through the peat, hits the bedrock, and off it goes. We have burns, we have streams, we have water, and it's brown. It's sometimes as black as Guinness. If it's in spate. So default situation, all water brown. Brown because of peat phenolic content. We reckon the water has a phenolic content of about 2 or 3 parts per million. Is that noticeable in the whisky when it's, I don't know, I wouldn't have thought so. Sure, the mineral content of the water is greatly affected. I mean, I was on, I took a slurp from a burn on Jura in the Paps the other day. And it was it was literally coming straight out of the side of the mountain, out of the quartz. And it was very, very minerally, very stony. It's why you don't find distilleries on chalk areas, because of the calcium in chalk. It's why breweries are located in specific parts, Burton-on-Trent and stuff, because the water was ideal for brewing. It's the same thing with the distilleries. You need a reliable water supply, primarily. It's no good having water that runs out every 5 minutes.
Yes.
Sure, we have water reliability problems here. This sponge effect, global warming. Will we ever have enough? I don't know. For our requirements, sure, we've got plenty. But it still means, in June, May, we sometimes have to stop because the sponge has dried up and there's no water left. But I think there's a lot of so-called experts in the industry that will say, oh yes, the water's irrelevant, it makes no difference whatsoever. We might as well be connected to the mains. Other people that say, oh well, no, the water's really important. But I would love to do a definitive. Perhaps that's what you should do, a definitive survey, because I'm sure it does make a difference. If it makes a difference for beer production, we're making beer first. So why should it suddenly become not pertinent? I don't have the technical answers for you yet, but I do think it does make a difference. Here we're on gneiss rock. This peninsula, the Rins of Islay, is gneiss rock.
The oldest rock in the world, isn't it?
In Britain. In Britain. 1,800 million years old. So that's the bedrock. Peat on top. I'm sure that has a mineral impact on the water that we have. An impact that would be different to our neighbouring distilleries. How it becomes apparent, the relevance, I don't know.